Heroes Group. This week is our roundtable with Legally Speaking with Steve. August is National Wellness Month. Today is Saturday, August 27th, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelly. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our partner on the line with us today, and that is a familiar voice you've heard many times on our show. That's Mr. Stephen J. Seidman. He's a founding attorney of Seidman Law Office with over 30 years as an experienced trial lawyer focused on personal injury. Steve is America's Heroes Group partner, sponsor, and advisory board member. We're going to catch up on some things he wants to talk to us about and some interesting topics, in particular when it comes to legal issues. So, Steve, how are you doing today?
Thank you very much, Sean. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. So what's new? What are some of the things you wanted to bring up on this week's show?
There's been a lot of movement since the last month. Actually, last month when I was here, we talked about the PACT Act, which is the Camp Lejeune and the Burn Pits Toxic Act. What is that? You've heard a lot about it on TV, Sean. Probably everybody has on the radio. Everybody is talking about the Camp Lejeune water. Lejeune water.
I've seen those commercials and things like that.
Right, more than you can imagine, and there's a reason for that. And if I could just give a little background, we've talked about this before, but I'm sure people hear this Camp Lejeune. What does it mean? And for veterans, it's particularly important. And I know I've talked to a couple of veterans about this, and they were actually stationed at Camp Lejeune. And for more than 30 years, service members and their families who were stationed at that base in North Carolina basically drank unknowingly and bathed in water contaminated with hazardous chemicals. And this was in Jacksonville, North Carolina, obviously a giant base. In the 1980s, they finally tested the water supply, found all kinds of environmental toxins of unbelievable vinyl chloride, benzene, just a litany of horrible chemicals that people were drinking and bathing in. And researchers who looked at this decided that these toxins increased the risk of various cancers, certain congenital disabilities, Parkinson's disease. And actually, Sean, more than 1 million people lived at Camp Lejeune during the contamination period. So what happened is people started to file VA claims, and we're going to get into that moment. And the VA sort of bollocks those up, and I'll get into that in a moment because that came out just this week, how badly the VA bollocksed up the people who were claiming toxicity and cancers caused by toxic water at Camp Lejeune. But it's been researched and determined that if you have bladder cancer, cardiac birth defects, because don't forget, families were in the fort as well, female infertility, kidney cancer, liver cancer, certain multiple myelomas, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, renal toxicity, breast cancer, goes on and on, esophageal cancer, leukemia, lung cancer, miscarriage, Parkinson's disease, scleroderma, just a list of actually presumed causes or things caused by the water, toxic water, Camp Lejeune. Now, what if it's not on those lists? For instance, I've talked to people who've had prostate cancer. I talked to a man who had sterility, even though female infertility is there, male sterility is not. That doesn't mean you can't pursue a lawsuit, which is done with the Federal Tort Claims Act form, and then a lawsuit within 2 years. What happens is you have to be able to prove through medical testimony that, for instance, the prostate cancer, the sterility for a male is caused by this toxic water. So just because you're not on the list of those list of things, it doesn't mean that you're certainly not entitled to receive benefits. And I highly suggest that anybody at Camp Lejeune who might have had these conditions look into this. Our office is doing these things, and we're pursuing a lot of these things. So that's Camp Lejeune.
On Camp Lejeune, Steve, like how hard is it to file a claim, and how's that process get started? Are veterans going to have to go through the same process of trying to prove something that they were there, or they were affected by it, or what's that process like?
The process is you're going to have to prove that you actually were stationed at Camp Lejeune. You're going to have to actually probably get a lawyer, because it's not like you can go to the VA and file for claims now, but it's not lawsuits that ask for pain and suffering and all of the other things that lawsuits give you. But the process is you file a tort claim. It's done just like any other federal case. And then if it's denied within 2 years, you have a right to file within the federal court of the from the denial. So just like every other case that we have, we have, for instance, malpractice at veterans facilities, at hospitals, veterans hospitals, same thing. You have to file tort claims with the Federal Tort Claims Act. It's a form. You have to state what your injuries are. You have to state the damages you want. And then if you are denied, then you have a certain number of time in which to file a case. Usually it's 180 days from the date of the denial. You have to file the tort claim within 2 years. That's how it is with all these cases.
So my fear would be is that if I don't get an attorney involved right now and I start doing stuff on my own, or if I go through the process, I just go to the VA and say, hey, I was there at Camp Lejeune, and I do have some of the things on that list. But then things get worse 10 years down the road. And then now I'm still functioning, I'm still okay today, but 10, 20 years later, I'm basically facing disability because I have something that's still debilitating, not just something that's, just an ailment. And then what is the recourse for those people who maybe don't do anything now, but wait a while and then say, okay, well, I don't need anything right now, but maybe if I get sick, hopefully I don't, but if something happens, maybe I'll look back to that incident and say, you know what, maybe I should have filed a claim, or maybe I should try to get disability.
Well, and you're exactly right. And the problem is, if it comes back 14 years and you do it wrong, or you don't file the lawsuit, you're out. Okay, you're out because there are certain time limits that apply to these lawsuits. If you don't file your lawsuits in time, the statute of limitations applies, and you are gone. No turning back on that, Sean.
Wow.
And I guess you could still go to the Department of Veterans Affairs, but just this week, Thursday, it was determined that the Department of Veterans Affairs mishandled nearly 40% of all disability claims filed for exposure to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. They denied or delayed benefits for 21,000 affected veterans. Out of the 57,500 claims filed since 2017 for that 30 years, they denied 17,200 prematurely instead of asking for additional information. And claims filed by another 2,300 veterans were assigned incorrect dates, denying them nearly $14 million in retroactive payments. So you could see that if you depend on the VA to do this instead of lawsuits with private lawyers, you're going to end up, perhaps, like all these other people, with a 40% error rate at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Kind of inexcusable that they literally, it's coming out just this week, literally mishandled these COVID these Lejeune claims. Actually mishandled them, and therefore the point you are making is, if you're going to pursue this, you ought to have a lawyer pursue it for you. And I'll give you some other examples if you want. We have the 3M hearing, the 3M lawsuit with the earplugs. This has been going on for a few years. We got involved in it early on. And so 3M was a big company, obviously. They purchased a unit called Aero Technologies. And Aero Technologies made millions and millions of dollars from the government by giving earplugs, by selling earplugs for combat. The one problem, they were useless.
Right.
And in fact, not only were they useless, there was a ketam. That's a whistleblower case that was brought. The Aero 3M paid $9 million to say, yeah, we cheated the federal government. That's what a ketam case is all about. So now it's litigation, full-blown litigation over people can't hear, or have tinnitus, ringing in their ears. And so what is 3M has a unit? Their unit is Aero Technologies. Just recently, Aero Technologies goes bankrupt. So they're trying to get out of their verdicts. One verdict has been $50 million because of punitive elements. They were taking people, making money with the military, providing useless product, and people lost their hearing. So this stuff goes on. But for lawyers who are involved filing these lawsuits and looking into these things, in my opinion, nothing happens with these folks. Now, there's going to be just like we see with the Johnson & Johnson talc thing right now, that talc causes cancer. They took that unit bankrupt trying to get out of those claims. We're going to see a lot of this coming on. But what we see here is you need lawyers. You need lawyers to do these things. Now we have, we talk about burn pits, right? The burn pits we've been talking about over the last few months. And what happens with the burn pits? The burn pits are those large fields or pits where they literally burnt all that stuff, causing cancers and all kinds of things. Well, they passed legislation, and that you could go to the VA if you're a veteran who have burn pit issues, and make sure that you go ahead and file your claims for all kinds of things that could be caused by all of those toxins in the burn pit. Interestingly, over the last month, the PACT Act, including the Lejeune, including the burn pit legislation, was all set to go. And you might have heard this on news, Sean, where like 25 senators, Republican senators, reversed course, even though it had been a kind of an act or legislation that was bipartisan. All of a sudden they flipped because they wanted additional things added into the package.
As always.
Well, that caused a big uproar. It finally got passed. But this is recent, and you must jump on your rights now, in my opinion.
So, Steve, how do people get a hold of you if they need to get information, also to get help for this type of case or any case, particularly for veterans? People that, once again, going back to the idea that if you don't have professional help, I hate to see someone go through the process, not get everything that they need, get to a situation where 10, 15, 20 years down the road, they look back and say, I wish I could have done something.
Well, Aaron, you could reach me always 312-781-1977, and that's my office number, 312-781-1977, and we do all kinds of these VA claims or veterans claims, including at VA hospitals, these type of Lejeune cases, and 3M cases as well. So we're doing a lot of these things, and I'll give you an example, if I can, of what you just mentioned. So when the COVID American Rescue Plan came out, the government put $400 million away for veteran retraining programs as part of the American Rescue Plan. And even though millions went into that aid, which is, by the way, going to revert back to the federal government, I'd like you to take a guess how many jobs for retraining were landed because of this $400 million that was available. How many do you think, Sean?
I couldn't tell you.
397 jobs.
Wow.
397 jobs. The offer to military veterans left employed by the pandemic was great, right? They said you could go online, and people still can, by the way. But then we had what happened. You had people, and we talked about this a few weeks ago with the jewelry place that took advantage of veterans. And then you had these colleges popped up, quote unquote, these online colleges. There was one Chicago-based, and they basically took money from the Department of Veterans Affairs and provided nothing. They had no teachers. They were unable to get the job done. And so as a result of that, even though only 6,800 veterans even enrolled in the program. And by the way, which is a shame because the $400 million is out there, right, to help get more jobs. But then they saw the cheaters come out. And then basically what happened is the for-profit schools. I
was going to get to that, the for-profit schools, because that was when all of those schools started getting a lot of heat.
That's right, and
because they were giving all these useless degrees. People trying to go in for nursing, people trying to go in for mechanics, all kinds of things that are real jobs that this country needs. And then they come out of all these $20,000 in debt, and then all of a sudden you have a worthless degree. But a lot of for veterans were targets because they wanted your VA money, they wanted your GI Bill.
Exactly. I mean, these schools, one of them which submitted false reports, misled veterans. They regained eligibility and then took money from the VA and said that they saw tremendous success And in fact, they basically just took the money. And so when you have 367 people, remember, $400 million, 397 people land jobs because of the for-profit that you just talked about. I mean, where does this depravity end, and this absolute greediness of these people? But there's still time, right? And so I suggest that if veterans who are listening to this show think that they could use this, they should go to this COVID aid package, look it up online, and start to apply to maybe legitimate schools. But at December, this disappears. It's like Cinderella, right? At 12 o'clock, it's over. Same thing here. You know, so, you know, and I'll tell you, one thing I've seen when working with veterans over the years has been really the people who've applied for benefits, and I've heard stories that really at first was sort of hard to believe, that, you know, and people call me and say, my God, Steve, this is what happened. And so there's actually a movie that came out just recently. It's called Breaking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it just came out, and it actually is about a true story of a tragic true story of a Marine veteran struggle with the VA. And it just came out, and it's about Marine veteran Brian Brown Easley, who served in Kuwait and Iraq. And after his discharge, he got on by a disability check from the Department of VA, but his life fell apart after that check was garnished to pay off a debt. Guess who, Sean? A for-profit college.
Wow.
Okay? So this actually, there's the star of the movie is well known, and I think it just came out in the theaters, and I think this would be the actor's name is John Boyega. He's been in many different things. The name of the movie is Breaking. I'm going to watch it. I think that it's going to tell a story that probably so many of your listeners are experiencing tragically, that what people have to go through. So I think that these for-profit colleges taking advantage of VA, of the veterans' money, it's kind of sad.
It is. And then people don't realize that you can't, in the military, you cannot have debt. Any outstanding debt, it's so easy to get your wages garnished because the military will not tolerate you being in debt or being delinquent on debt. So they'll garnish your checks, and they can take your whole check to pay off some past due bill or past due debt. So you have gotten, just like this young man's story, gotten into debt because of a for-profit college. You didn't get a degree that was of any use to you, but now you have all this debt's going to will take you 10 years to get this money back, 20 years to get this money back. That is sad.
Yeah, it's incredibly sad. And then we see the private individuals, the jewelers who we talked about, taking advantage of the veterans and selling them bills of goods and active military. And it's a shame. One last thing, because I know I'm running out of time, is that many months ago, executive producer Glenda Smith did a great job. There's a lawsuit that was filed for discrimination with African Americans in the VA process. That is still pending, and I know at one point we're going to try to get some congressional support to help us kind of move that ball forward. And I think it would be important, because what we're finding out is that there's been an inordinate amount of denials for veterans benefits, disability benefits at the VA to those of color. And I think over the next course of months, we have to look into that and start that process again of really trying to help that get cooking again. And finally, leaving on a good note, years ago when I started with veterans, with the Heroes Group, there was the Ferris Act, which prevented active military from pursuing medical malpractice claims. This week on Thursday, the U.S. Department of Defense released a final rule allowing service members to make claims for medical malpractice at military facilities. So that's a wonderful thing. It is. It's and I know I have to leave you because we're out of time, but thank you.
This is our advisory board member, Attorney Steve Steidman, 312-781-1977. Anything regarding Camp Lejeune or any legal questions you have, he's a good attorney, a person who's got a lot of experience and a lot of success dealing with these issues and has educated a lot of us on what can be done to help veterans. Protect yourself out there. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Sean. Have a great day.
You too.
Hi, I'm Cliff Kelly, Vietnam veteran and host of America's Heroes Group, the game changer in radio, print, and digital media programming. We are a roundtable talk show where information, resources, and referrals are provided intentionally every Saturday to empower our military population on WVON 1690 AM, the iHeart Radio app from 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please visit our website at www.americashg.org. Hi, this is Cliff Kelly, the host of America's Heroes Group. If you or a loved one has been injured in an accident or the result of malpractice, you have only one chance to get the compensation you deserve. You need a law firm you can trust with experience and resources who will fight on your behalf. With a proven track record of excellence both in and out of the courtroom, call Seidman, Margulis, and Fairman at 312-781-1977 for a free consultation, or visit SeidmanLaw.net. That's Seidman, SEIDMAN, law.net.
Hello, this is Darren Jeffrey. I was the course creator for American Ninja Warrior on NBC. I'm also a founding board member for the Rick Harriman Foundation, or RHF. RHF is proud to partner with America's Heroes Group in bringing you this year's RHF Ninja Warrior O course, free for active and retired military families, September 10th and 17th at Rick's Place, located 5 minutes from the front gate of Fort Bragg, Fayetteville, North Carolina. If you're a ninja or wish to volunteer at this event, visit rhfnow.org/ninja and register. If you would like to thank these incredible men and women in uniform and their families, be a sponsor. Visit rhfnow.org/sponsor and come on out and meet the RHF family.
Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. The Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
And welcome back to America's Heroes Group. And this time with our roundtable community outreach with the NADCP. That's the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. August is National Wellness Month. Saturday, August 27th, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelly. My name is Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have an exciting new panelist with us today. That's Christopher Deutsch. He's the Director of Communications for the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, the leading treatment court training, membership, and advocacy organization. And we're going to talk about the mission and purpose of that organization, and also an upcoming conference that we have coming up with this organization. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure. So tell us first of all, what is drug court, and then also, but then also go into the different details of Veterans Court, how that pertains, DWI Court, which kind of all get lumped in together.
That's a great question. I like to think of drug courts and other treatment courts as like the best kept secret in the justice system, because the fact of the matter is these programs have been around since 1989. So in Miami-Dade, Florida, late 1980s, the justice system is overwhelmed with people coming before the courts with substance use disorders, mental health disorders. And judges are trying a couple of things. They're going to be lenient, and the folks keep coming back. They're trying to be harsh, and the folks keep coming back. And so they're throwing up their hands and saying, what can we do to help these folks so that we stop the revolving door? And what they came up with was drug court. And the idea was pretty simple, but quite radical. It was to take all of the stakeholders, the judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, case managers, probation, law enforcement, and have them work as a team. and then bring in treatment providers and folks to help with other recovery support and get them all working together to assess these folks, figure out what they need, get them treatment, support them, and get them on a path to recovery. And the spark that was lit in 1989 took off around the country because all over the country, folks were equally frustrated. And here comes something that works, drug court. So drug courts began to expand very rapidly, and pretty soon people started to realize that the model could be adapted to serve other populations. So in the late 90s, we saw DWI courts for folks who had repeat DWI offenses. We saw juvenile drug courts, family drug courts for situations where children have been removed from the home due to parental addiction. And then in the 2000s, around 2008, a judge up in Buffalo, New York, who was a drug court judge and a mental health court judge, began to see an increase in the number of veterans who were coming through his court dockets. And he started to ask himself, boy, these folks have very specific clinical needs, social needs. It's a very specific culture. What can we do to support them? And it's interesting. He had a Vietnam veteran in his mental health court, and he had been trying for weeks to reach this gentleman, and he was unresponsive. And one day, in a moment of exasperation, Judge Robert Russell tells his court coordinator, who was also a Vietnam veteran, and another member of his staff, he says, guys, can you take this gentleman out in the hall? Maybe you can reach him, vet to vet. They take the guy out in the hall. They talk for about an hour. And the next time the judge calls the case, the gentleman stands at parade rest. And Judge Russell says, are you willing to accept the help we're offering you? And the guy says, yes, sir. And at that moment, Judge Russell realized there is a therapeutic element to the camaraderie that exists among those who have served. And he began to work with his team to set up what became the nation's first veterans treatment court, based on the drug court model, but specific for veterans, veterans-only docket. Brought in resources from the local VA medical center and really set up a place where the veterans felt comfortable accepting help and supporting one another. And fast forward to today, and we are well over 400 operational veterans treatment courts in the United States.
Wow, I think that's a really powerful thing to focus on the treatment versus on the punishment, because the punishment just leads to recidivism. It doesn't really fix the problem at all. It just leads to the same problem back and back again, which costs more money. And what I've been understanding is when you're doing this type of work that you're doing, when you're using drug courts and veterans courts, it actually is a fraction of the cost of the criminal court system. So we're saving money as taxpayers, but at the same time, getting better results.
You're exactly right. It's one of the reasons these have such strong bipartisan support. It's partly that cost-saving element, but you're so right about punishment. You know, this country, we've experimented with the notion of trying to punish our way out of these issues. And no matter where you fall on the political spectrum or the ideological spectrum, we can all acknowledge that it has not worked.
Right.
You know, lock them up, throw away the key has not worked. What people need is treatment. You know, we often talk about treatment courts or drug courts, veterans treatment courts, as a combination of accountability and compassion. It doesn't mean that people are going to get a get out of jail free card or they can continue using and go about their business. No, they're held accountable, but that accountability comes in the form of confronting their issues through treatment and doing the difficult work of getting their lives back on track. And when you give people that opportunity, you know, you'd be amazed how their lives just transform. So it's a radical new approach.
I want to talk about that point right there, because the one thing that I've read about, and also reading the information that you sent, it's not an easy thing. This is not a get out of free jail card. I wanted to go on that and kind of go back into that a little bit more, because when you sign up for this, you are making a commitment and you're going to be held accountable for this.
That's exactly right. You know, early on, when drug courts were first getting off the ground, I think there was a lot of pushback from folks who said, wait a second, we're helping these people? Well, you know, no, they're criminals. They belong in jail. And what drug courts proved is that accountability or justice can look very different. We don't have to bind ourselves to this very narrow view of justice being punishment. You're exactly right. When someone enters a treatment court, they have to agree to the rigors of that program. And it is rigorous. They're going to appear frequently before the judge to have their progress reviewed. They're going to go to treatment. They're going to go to meetings. They're going to have a case manager. As they move along the program, they may be asked to start looking for employment. And along the way, they are coming to terms with really serious substance use and mental health disorders. And anyone who knows anyone who has struggled with those issues knows, kicking addiction, that is not easy. That is not for the faint of heart. And it is not an easy road. And so any notion that this is somehow more lenient, I think is really a misunderstanding of what this is all about. And the other thing I'll add is these are lengthy programs. Folks are usually in for 12, sometimes 18, sometimes 24 months. And what we found, what the research shows, is that's really the length of time it takes for someone to get their life back. I mean, you're talking people who have been, in some cases, out on the streets for 10, 15, 20 years. Their health has deteriorated.
Wow.
Their family's given up on them. They don't have stable housing. And to repair that takes time. And so treatment courts allow for that lengthy period of time for folks to really rebuild.
Now, for people that suffer from PTSD, which is common in the veteran community, but also a lot of research shows that people also who are not necessarily veterans may have symptoms of PTSD or exhibit the PTSD from maybe even childhood trauma or their environment. So how does that play into the treatment process of going through the programs?
That's such a great question, because the fact of the matter is most of the people who come through a treatment court of any kind are dealing with some sort of trauma in their life that may manifest in PTSD or in other ways. And so, one of the benefits of a treatment court is that they're bringing in all sorts of treatment providers based on the clinical needs of that individual. So when a person gets referred to one of these programs, they're going to get a clinical assessment, and that's going to help inform, what does this person need? Do they need strictly inpatient addiction treatment? Do they need mental health support? Is there PTSD there? And then the court's going to go out and connect them to that treatment, because it's not enough, as you correctly point out, you can't just address the substance use disorder if behind that there is some sort of mental health issue going on, and you've got to treat them both. And in most cases, most people who come before the programs have some sort of co-occurring disorder. And a lot of times in veterans treatment court, the substance use is really the self-medicating to mask some of the mental anguish that they're going through. And so it's peeling back those layers and really treating all aspects of the individual.
And to be clear, so if a person, and it's not something you can just sign up for, that you have to be selected, is that correct?
Yes, you've got to. These are for folks who are justice involved,
okay.
And so
it's not like the person, an attorney can't say, well, we're going to try to get them into this, or how does that part work? So if a person's arrested and say they did a serious crime and they want to make an appeal to the judge, hey, I want to turn my life around, can I go to instead of doing this, can I go to a drug court or a veterans court instead?
Yeah. So typically it's going to be the attorney. But, it's amazing, especially in communities where these programs have really become a bit of a mainstay. Sometimes it's a family member. I was meeting with a guy who graduated drug court 15 years ago, and I said, you never told me, how did you get in the program? He said, I was sitting in jail. I assumed I was going to be locked away for a long time.
Wow.
And my mom said, wait, there's a drug court. We should try to get you in it. So these referrals can come from lots of different places, but the long and short of it is, if it looks like someone may be eligible and that referral is made, they'll get assessed. And first and foremost, these are treatment courts, so there really should be for folks who have a clinical diagnosis of either an addiction or a substance use or a mental health disorder or some sort of trauma. And then there's some eligibility requirements around whatever the criminal activity is. But what's really interesting is that the research shows the people who do best in a treatment court, particularly a drug court, are the people with the more serious criminal histories and the more serious substance use disorders. In other words, it's not necessarily the best program for that, first-time offender or the kid in their early 20s who's experimenting with drugs and gets kind of caught up. These programs work the best for the folks who are 10, 15, 20 years into their issues and have been in and out of the justice system and maybe facing lengthy incarceration.
Well, I think that is. I think because people hit the rock bottom and that's just what they just say, I can't keep doing this, or is it, man, my life is over if I don't do this?
I think there's probably some of that. I think it's partly because these are rigorous and intense programs. And like I said earlier, you don't necessarily want to over-resource someone who may do better in a less intensive program or pretrial diversion. You don't want to over-resource them or overburden them in a treatment court. But for the folks who really need that sort of full 360 repair, a year and a half, 2-year program treatment court is going to be right for them because it's going to take the time to build them back up and get them, reconnected, not only connected to treatment, but reconnected socially, housing, employment, education, health. Some folks need, dental work.
Wow.
Court's going to help them with that. It's really going to work best with the folks who have been struggling for a really long time.
One thing I thought was really interesting, and this will break a lot of stigmas and I think stereotypes, is that some of the people that are in these programs are not we have the stereotype of a guy laying out in the street somewhere in a gutter with a needle stuck in his arm, and he's been robbing people and doing all kinds of horrible things. These sometimes are accountants. These sometimes are lawyers. These sometimes are doctors. These sometimes are CPAs that they're doing crazy stuff to keep their addiction going or to keep their problem going, and they're just self-medicating and doing really bad crimes, but not necessarily anything that's violent per se to anybody, but serious crimes that can get them in a lot of trouble, and they're really on the path to destruction.
Yeah, you're so right. There's one sort of misconception about these programs is that they're for sort of the low-level, person who has a drug possession charge. Well, it's not really for them. But as you say, there's folks who are facing lengthy criminal penalties for breaking and entering, check fraud. In some cases, particularly in Veterans Treatment Court, that tend to take more violent offenses, assault, multiple DWIs, serious crimes, where the only thing standing between them and the jailhouse is some sort of intervention like a treatment court. But the other, I think you hit on a really good point too, which is that, addiction, mental illness, these don't know any boundaries. These things affect all of us, and particularly now. I mean, we are in the grips of an ongoing addiction epidemic. It's sometimes referred to as the opioid epidemic, but frankly, at this point, it's bigger than that. And you're exactly right. It's not the preconceived notion of the sort of person you see shuffling down the street with a shopping cart. Yes, those folks are still coming into contact with the justice system and need help. But it's also professionals and people of all walks of life and all socioeconomic backgrounds.
And if they pass or go through the treatment, do they get expungements, or what happens to their criminal record?
It's going to depend on the court, but typically there is an incentive involved to participate, and that would be that, yes, you would get expunged at the end, your charges would be reduced, you won't be saddled with a felony conviction. I mean, one of the real impetus for driving these programs is that we know how destructive it can be for someone to try to get a job, try to find employment or education with a felony conviction. And if we can hold people accountable, but support them and treat them and not saddle with them with that conviction, that's a really good thing. That's going to, there's a number of factors that will make a difference between whether or not someone comes back into the contact with the justice system, but that's a big one. If they can be free and clear of those charges after they've done the work that the court has asked them to do, then why not set them on a path to success by freeing them from having that conviction?
It seems like such a powerful, amazing, this groundbreaking idea to have a situation where you're basically taking people who are really problems in the community, because even though they're not, necessarily committing murder or child abuse or things like that, but they're still a threat and a danger. A person who was a repeat DUI offender, a person who was stealing money. There was a Reddit article about a CPA who was somehow hustling OxyContin, and because she had an OxyContin addiction. All these problems, which are big problems to the community, but instead of punishing the person, you clear the path to get to the problem. So now that person has a clear path to be more productive in society, to do the right things in society. Now, what's the next step of trying to expand programs like this across the country, even to reach more people? Is that something that's on the horizon?
Yeah, they continue to grow. All told, we're well over 4,000 total treatment courts, which is great. I mean, that's, I think that shows that there's a real appetite out there at the community and state and federal level for this type of approach. But we know we're not reaching the vast majority of folks in the justice system who really need it. And so you're exactly right. The name of the game now is to continue to educate, to work with communities, to start investigating how they can implement one of these programs. We need to raise the census of the total number of people who are involved in a treatment court. We estimate that it's about 150,000, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But there's, by some estimates, 1 million to 1.2 million people involved in the justice system today who would benefit from a treatment court but don't have access. And the one thing I'll add to that is what goes part and parcel to that expansion is expanding the treatment infrastructure in this country. We spoke earlier about the addiction epidemic. Every single person in this country should have access to quality, affordable, evidence-based treatment. And in a lot of communities, whether there's a drug court or not, there may not be quality, affordable, evidence-based treatment, inpatient beds. And so, as treatment courts continue to expand, we need to also be thinking about that treatment infrastructure and how do we grow that and just get more, how do we get more people into treatment before they're even involved in the justice system? That point, ultimately that's the goal.
Wow, that's a good point. So one of the things I also think we talked about, so it's vets. We want to talk first. Let's make this disclaimer. Vets typically, studies show, have lower incarceration rates. So we do have Veterans Court, which is, I think, something there's an honor to it to me, because we're helping veterans, people that serve this country, who have got demons from maybe their service, but also might have had issues before they got into the military, and we're helping to treat that, make them better, more productive citizens, and who knows, maybe they can go out and help other people. So there's honor part to that. But the thing is that this process is way more effective at reducing crime in general. Instead of going the punishment route, the treatment part of it. So what obstacles do you have besides infrastructure? We talked about that, but what other obstacles politically do you see that are in the way of helping this expand more, where we start to reframe our idea about solving the problem?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, a couple of those really important points. It sounds a little cliche, but this is truly a bipartisan issue. I mean, we see support for treatment courts in the deepest of red states and the bluest of blue states. I think generally in this country, we are still working through, changing our perceptions around what does it mean, what does justice really mean? And I think all too often, we are still very quick in this country to think of anyone in handcuffs as a criminal who deserves to be punished, and that justice being served is punishment. Excuse me. So there's still work to be done, I think, to change that notion.
Now, how do we get there? So what can we do as veterans? I think shows like this really help, first of all. And also, like we mentioned before, for anybody who does have the idea that, we're just giving these people a free pass or a free second chance, you have to understand that this is not the process. I've even read reports that people have actually chosen to go to jail when they after trying to go through a treatment program. So it was so
Right.
tough. They said, "Forget this.
Right.
I'd rather do my time in jail." And
Right.
I'll see you in court again someday. So this is not an easy process.
Well, and I think a couple of things. One is the research shows it works.
Mhm.
It works. I mean, it lowers recidivism. It improves education. It improves employment. It improves housing stability, financial stability, family reunification, and it saves money. Now, we don't always get behind in this country things that are proven to work, right? So there's other elements too. I think shows like this, talking about this, not running from these really difficult conversations around addiction and mental health, around veterans issues. The more we can, you mentioned stigma earlier, the more we can talk openly and honestly about these issues, the more there's an understanding that they're treatable and people can overcome them.
So
I think sometimes,
not to interrupt, but so what's missing then? So we started this about 20 years ago. It's been around 20, almost 30 years now. So, and you have about 200,000 people roughly in the program today. But you're saying there could be another million or so, or more, that this could be reaching. And we need infrastructure. We need, we can't just put the courts in there and without the infrastructure in place. The infrastructure's got to be provided. How does that get laid out? When are we going to start building the infrastructure? What's the next step for that part of it?
Well, I think the pace of progress is actually, let's think about it this way, right? Prior to 1989, there was the idea of having a judge, trained on addiction, understanding addiction, and willing to work with a treatment provider on his or her team in the courtroom did not exist. And so I do think, if we take a step back, that incredible progress has been made in the grand scheme of things with a short period of time. That idea that there are 4,500 to 4,700 communities in this country that have said enough is enough. We now believe that people deserve treatment instead of incarceration is really positive. Now, that said, you're right. We've got to continue to keep the pedal down and keep the pressure on to grow these. One thing that I think does help is hearing from folks, not necessarily like me, but folks who have been through the program, people who have turned their lives around and are productive members of the community. Because when you start to think about that image that folks might have in their head of who's involved in the justice system or who has an addiction, and then we show them, well, this person is now a parent, an employee, paying taxes, being a neighbor, being involved civically. The more we can tell these stories of success. I talked to a young woman 2 weeks ago. She graduated, she had a terrible addiction to opioids, graduated a drug court. They encouraged her to go to college to get a bachelor's degree. She did. Then she went and got her law degree.
Wow.
Then she passed the bar. Then she became a prosecutor in the same drug court that saved her life 15 years prior. And that's a remarkable story, but I promise you, I hear stories like that all the time. People who go on to do incredible things, and incredible might just be being there for their kids and their spouse, but people truly put their lives back together and live productively. And the more we can tell those stories, I think the more support there is for this type of approach.
Last minute. So we didn't get to that point of your conference is coming up. So tell us a little about, in 1 minute or less, what is this conference about and what do you want to get accomplished in this conference?
Well, we had it, actually. It was in July. I'm still recovering from it. We had 8,000 justice, public health and public safety folks come to Nashville, Tennessee, 8,000. And they were there for one reason. They wanted to learn how to save more lives, do their work better, follow evidence-based practices. So we had a great 4 days. We tried to inspire them and send them home ready to continue their difficult work. Next year, we're going to be in Houston, Texas. We do it every year, and it's called RISE, and you can go to NADCPconference.org if you'd like to learn a little more, see some pictures. But it was a great event, and what it showed me is that there are folks all over this country who are deeply committed to this work and who will continue to be on the front lines of these issues.
Christopher Deutsch, it was great to have you on the show, Director in Communications for the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, and food. Look good.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
On behalf of Cliff Kelly, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for the partnership. Yes. Yes.
.americashg.org.
Hello, this is Darren Jeffrey. I was the course creator for American Ninja Warrior on NBC. I'm also a founding board member for the Rick Harriman Foundation, or RHF. RHF is proud to partner with America's Heroes Group in bringing you this year's RHF Ninja Warrior O course, free for active and retired military families, September 10th and 17th at Rick's Place, located 5 minutes from the front gate of Fort Bragg, Fayetteville, North Carolina. If you're a ninja or wish to volunteer at this event, visit rhfnow.org/ninja and register. If you would like to thank these incredible men and women in uniform and their families, be a sponsor. Visit rhfnow.org/sponsor and come on out and meet the RHF family.
From the Xfinity Studios at WVON, it's America's Heroes Group, hosted by Cliff Kelly, with co-host Dr. Damon Arnold and National Guard veteran Sean Claiborne on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group with a roundtable with the state of Indiana partner DAV, Disabled American Veterans. August is National Wellness Month. Today is Saturday, August 27th, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelly. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our partner on the line, a great guy, Bob Carnagey. He's a U.S. Army Vietnam veteran and the state commander of the Disabled American Veterans. And we're going to talk about educating veterans about the advantages and disadvantages and the steps needed to file your burn pit benefits through the DAV, which is a serious topic we've been talking about on the show for a while. Bob Carnagey, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. I haven't talked to you in a long time. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a minute or two, yes.
So tell us, what do we need to know about burn pits? We've talked about on previous shows how serious burn pits were. So people that aren't familiar with our show, haven't seen the talk about burn pits. Burn pits were basically large garbage cans, large makeshift incendiary devices. A pit that could be as big as a football field, could be big as 3 or 4 football fields, or as small as a backyard, where you dumped basically anything and everything into this pit and burned it to get rid of it. And then you just filled the pit over after everything burned off as much as it possibly could, releasing tons of toxic chemicals. Things burn like batteries, things burn like kerosene, things burn like ammunition, jet fuel, any kind of ordnance you could think of. Anything that we needed to get rid of was burned in these big burn pits. And that has led to a lot of health issues for people. So what do people need to do when they're contacting the DAV in order to get help and file a claim?
Okay, well, I think you've described the content of burn pits very well. But they've been used for years and years and years. And what we have found is that the residual from those fires that have been create a lot of causticity that we breathe in, whether you're nearby or in the general vicinity, or, can be quite a ways away. And as the intake from that begins to eat at the inside of us, primarily the lungs and other things as we're doing our breathing. And so how do you then follow up now that the government has agreed that those areas that have been used for years and years and years now have potentially led to illnesses and diseases that our veterans have after their service time? So one of the ways that you can solve this or work with this is by talking to the Disabled American Veterans. The Disabled American Veterans has chapters all over the United States. They have 1.3 million members across the country. Now, I'm in Indiana, in northwest Indiana, really 45 minutes from downtown Chicago. In Indiana, we have 26 chapters. Those chapters are like any veteran service officer, any veteran service organization that you can find in any community. We have monthly meetings, and when you attend those meetings, there's somebody in that room that's special. That person is called a service officer. That person is employed by the DAV, and their job is to talk to veterans and find out what has happened to them during their service time. And of course, part of that conversation might be, were you exposed to burn pits and breathing in those toxic chemicals in the air from being in a particular unit that had a burn pit? Now, what happens then? After that conversation takes place, the veteran gets to decide if they would like to have the DAV service rep that they're talking to represent them as they file a claim for this potential illnesses that they have gotten from being exposed to burn pits. And that claim gets processed in a couple different ways. First off, there's a document that gets created, and the service officer will help. Part of that documentation that's filled out is you give that service officer the right to represent you to the VA. It takes probably a couple visits with that person to get all the paperwork correct and in order, and then that paperwork is sent to the VA, and that's the starting point. And that means that a claim has been complete and is filed with the VA, and in the eyes of that service officer who has done many, many, many claims, it is complete as he knows the VA wants to see it. In other words, the right forms are filled, the right information was put in there. They're not making an adjudication on that claim. They're not saying, yes, it's accepted or not, but they're saying it is filed in a manner that is acceptable to the VA for processing. Then that documentation gets filed with the VA, and that is the key right there. That file could get started by myself going to a VA website, gathering all the information that I just filled out with that service officer at the VA meeting, and try to figure it all out and what I need to do to fill it in. It's an arduous process. Some of the questions, I won't say they're tricky, but it's not stuff that I fill out on an everyday basis, so I may not understand the right way to phrase some things. The service officer does know that because that's their job.
Okay.
And consequently, the confidence level of the claim being filed accurately the first time because of content and the way it was filled out goes up because you've got an experienced person helping. If you're doing it yourself, maybe it's the first time you've ever done anything like that. Odds are you may make a couple mistakes. If you do, it's going to come back to you for corrections, and it may come back once or twice or three times. By having somebody who is experienced helping you fill this out goes a long way in getting the process shortened. Because remember when I said the claim gets to the VA, it's in a stack of other claims. Doesn't matter how it came in. Doesn't matter that it came in from the DAV, somebody helping you. It doesn't matter if you had a lawyer. Doesn't matter if you did it yourself. It all gets into a homogeneous stack. So that when you get in that stack, you're like everybody else in there, no matter who helped you file it. And that's very, very important because as I've listened to the radio and seen on TV, there are a lot of law firms that now want to help us to do that. And as a layman who's never done anything like this before, I look at maybe the paperwork as I pulled it down online from the VA and go, man, I don't know this. I don't know how to do this. I'm intimidated by it a little bit. And so I'm going to need some help. Well, they don't know where to go get that help. And so they go to a lawyer. That's not bad advice, but the lawyer is working to make money. And they're going to help you just like the guy from the DAV helps you. And you think they're going to be more qualified to give you the assistance you require because they're a lawyer, but they may not have ever filed a claim with the VA for military compensation. Where the guy who's working for the VA, that's his job. He's been doing it for years in certain situations.
So the key is making sure that you have an attorney that, if you do get an attorney, that they have that experience working with the DAV. But do you guys work with attorneys in some cases?
No, we don't work with attorneys.
Okay.
That attorney is working for you and taking your claim to the VA. And here's the problem. The minute you sign a release to them to represent you, you've just said, oh, what was your fee policy? Oh, you wanted 30 or 40% of my first claim? And if you read the document you sign with the lawyer, that's exactly what you've signed up for. And what that means because this takes time, over multiple months, the VA tracks when they accepted your claim, and once it's all done, maybe 6, 7, 8 months from now, and they determine that your claim has a monetary value on a monthly basis, then they look at how long they've had that claim from when they accepted it. Could have been a lot of paperwork before, but once they accepted it, it's time-stamped. I'll give you my example. My claim was accepted in January. It was finally approved 9 months later. But when it was accepted in January for a value of so much a month, they went back and paid me for December, from January to, I think it was November. So 9 months, 10 months. And so whatever my monthly stipend was that I'm getting from the VA for the illnesses I had, times the number of months it worked through the system, is your first payment. After that, you get that monthly stipend, but the first time you get the backlog of the number of months it processed. Well, that, in my situation, it was about $10,000. If I had to gone to a lawyer for that, he would have gotten $3,000 to $4,000 of that.
Wow.
For just handling the paperwork and helping me file the claim, doing the same thing the veteran service officer for the DAV did it for nothing.
So let me ask you this: so is hiring an attorney really advantageous then? Because we just talked to an attorney earlier today, and he works with a lot of veterans and does a lot of cases. But is a veteran service organization like the DAV a qualified attorney, is there any advantage to an attorney?
Okay, so the first thing you just said was qualified attorney. Now, if just because a person has a law degree and they are a qualified attorney, what type of cases have they been handling? Now, if you find an attorney who's been handling a lot of VA claims, then I would say he was qualified in handling VA claims.
Okay.
No doubt. I wouldn't argue that point at all.
But is it going to get you any different result if you go with
it?
It
is not. Generally speaking, and I'm going to have to talk in generalities because I'm sure you could have a case that was different, and something special, something unique that I'm not going to be able to cover in my response. But for the most part, it's not going to be any different. And the reason for that is this: that veteran service officer may not have a law degree, but he may have been helping veterans file claims for the last 20 years. And the lawyer may have been helping people file claims for the last 2 years. Or maybe this is the first time he did it. Because the guy working for the DAV, that's his job. That's all he does. He doesn't do anything else. He doesn't take a divorce case. He doesn't take, I want to evict my neighbor from my property next door. That's not what we do. We do one thing. We help veterans file claims. That's it, to get VA benefits. That is their sole existence. They're trained annually for hours upon hours upon hours. Sometimes it's on new nuances, particularly this stuff with burn pits, this PAC case, this PAC law that was just solved for the Camp Lejeune guys and things like that. They have unique training before those things are ever released. And you see the newspaper article saying, oh, this law was passed or this nuance was passed. They are way ahead of the power curve because they've been trained. And consequently, and I'm not talking down attorneys. Please don't feel that I am, because I'm really, really not. But I have a good friend who is a lawyer. He's now a judge. He had time in the Marines. I think he had 5 or 6 years in the Marines. So once he got his law degree, he says, I want to help the veterans. He started to do what we're just talking about. What he found, he didn't put an ad in the paper to tell veterans to come and see him. It was kind of like by word of mouth. So he did not get very many people just happened into his office to ask for help in filing a claim. So he didn't get a lot of action from that. And consequently, his skills weren't honed and improved over and over and over again because he was doing that along with other things. He was kind of like, a general practitioner. So the guy who was going to focus on filing claims, the lawyer that's going to do that, it may take him quite a while to build up a whole level of expertise, where the guy who is the veteran service officer for the DAV, I know one guy who probably does 400 of them a month.
Wow.
All with different concentrations, may not all be burn pits, it can be different things. But that's the kind of activity that happens. If you want to take a look at how many veterans are in the United States today that have claims that have been approved, not claims pending or waiting, there are 12 million veterans in the United States today that are receiving compensation from the VA. And so there's a lot of people that have helped those guys get those claims. There's a few that have done it on their own. I've talked to a guy who did it. I said, how'd you do it? He said, well, I got it bounced back a couple times, because he made some mistakes and didn't have any experience, which is natural. And so that's why the people that are working for the DAV as a service officer are so precious to help our veterans, because they do it because they're working for an organization that covers the income for that individual. That's all that person does is file claims. And again, once they get to the VA to be evaluated, they get in a stack. But that stack doesn't say, oh, this stack is for lawyers, this stack is for guys who did it themselves, this stack is for guys who have gone through the VA. No, through the DAV. All of them are in one pile. So you don't get a jump ahead by going to a lawyer. You don't get a jump ahead by even going to one of the DAV service officers or other service officers that work for other service organizations. So, I can't tell everybody in the world just go line up at the local DAV office and go to their meetings and meet the service officer and have them help you. I would like to. I know that's a tough thing to do, but in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion and my experience, that's the best way to do it, because even though those guys may not be a lawyer, they are equally qualified, if not more qualified, in handling claims for the VA.
Now, does the VA, have you seen the VA offer settlements that's outside of the normal the VA benefit process? Because there's already a codified VA process where you get a percentage if you're considered disabled, whether you qualify for certain types of treatments from the VA, things like that. But have you ever seen, like, say, a person had something horrible happen to them in the military, and the military or the VA basically gave them a settlement that's different from the traditional benefits that you get from being a disabled veteran?
Yes, I have heard of that. But here's the thing that you have to understand. And I'm not an expert on this, so somebody could call in 2 minutes and say that's not accurate. But for all practical purposes, pick an injury. Let's just say a guy had a broken leg in basic training. Okay, let's just use that as an example. So once he got out, he had problems and this, that, and the other thing. And so the VA said, okay, you do get a service-connected disability because of that, and your knee was damaged or whatever that might be. So that's going to be so much a month we're going to pay you. Or, in your question, will they give him a lump sum? That is a possibility. But let's just say that lump sum equals $15,000. If he got a monthly stipend from them spread out, guaranteed it's not going to be more. Neither way is it going to be more than $15,000. The lump sum, though, he got it up front. If he took it out, if he got it in benefits, monthly benefits, might be spread out over 20 years. Eventually, that will get to be more than what that lump sum was. You're never going to get more than you would get. In other words, they say it's worth X. They're not going to give you more for taking in a lump sum. And I don't know what triggers the lump sum payment. I truly, truly do not know. But a service officer could help you, I'm sure. A lawyer that has experience. A lawyer who doesn't have much experience probably can't. I can tell you that almost all the people that I know that have a service-connected disability get paid on a monthly basis.
So really, the military doesn't like to pay out money when it comes down when they get the bottom line.
And that lump sum up front, no. And I know guys who have not been their claim hasn't been adjudicated by the VA in a timely manner, or they challenge and it goes back and forth for years. Finally, it gets settled, and it's a huge lump sum. That doesn't happen often. I don't want people to listen to this and say, hey, Bob just said I'm going to be, $200,000 there or whatever. That's not what I'm saying to you, but there are those kinds of situations that do happen. They then will pay a lump sum out because all of that back pay that was accumulated from the time they started this process could be years. Could be 4 or 5 years, 6, 7 years. And so that's where those lump sums come out.
Wow.
Because of the time that it took to get this resolved correctly. Because the first time they came back and said, no, we're not going to pay that. And somebody helped you, whether it was a lawyer, whether it was a veteran service officer from the DAV. They said, no, let's go back. Let's challenge this. We go back and forth. And it takes years because every time it gets in another stack,
Bob, I got to cut you off. That was great information. That was Bob. But we have to continue this conversation, Bob. I love to have you back on the show. I love you, Bob. Bob Carnagey, U.S. Army veteran, State Commander of the Disabled American Veterans. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Cliff Kelly, Vietnam veteran and host of America's Heroes Group, the game changer in radio, print, and digital media programming. We are a roundtable talk show where information, resources, and referrals are provided intentionally every Saturday to empower our military population on WVON 1690 AM, the iHeart Radio app from 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please visit our website at www.americashg.org. Hi, this is Cliff Kelly, the host of America's Heroes Group. If you or a loved one has been injured in an accident or the result of malpractice, you have only one chance to get the compensation you deserve. You need a law firm you can trust with experience and resources who will fight on your behalf. With a proven track record of excellence both in and out of the courtroom, call Seidman, Margulis, and Fairman at 312-781-1977 for a free consultation, or visit SeidmanLaw.net. That's Seidman, SEIDMAN, law.net.
Hello, this is Darren Jeffrey. I was the course creator for American Ninja Warrior on NBC. I'm also a founding board member for the Rick Harriman Foundation, or RHF. RHF is proud to partner with America's Heroes Group in bringing you this year's RHF Ninja Warrior O course, free for active and retired military families, September 10th and 17th at Rick's Place, located 5 minutes from the front gate of Fort Bragg, Fayetteville, North Carolina. If you're a ninja or wish to volunteer at this event, visit rhfnow.org/ninja and register. If you would like to thank these incredible men and women in uniform and their families, be a sponsor. Visit rhfnow.org/sponsor and come on out and meet the RHF family.
Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. The Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
We are back. America's Heroes Group, roundtable with our partner, VETS. That's the Veterans Employment and Training Service. August is National Wellness Month. Today is Saturday, August 27th, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelly. I'm Sean Claiborne, co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a panelist with us today. That is William Keenan Torrens. He's a U.S. Army operations with Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and also presently serves as the director of the Veterans Employment and Training Services, VETS, Compliance and Investigation Division. And we're going to talk about the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, USERRA, otherwise known as. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. So a lot of guys have returned back from Afghanistan, and a lot of people were National Guard, and like I was, or reservists, and they had problems going back to their jobs. So what's going on with that? Tell us about the act and what it means.
Okay, well, happy to. The Uniformed Services Employment Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, USERRA, does three basic things. And if you understand these, then you understand the statute. The first thing the law does under Section 4311, 38 U.S. Code Section 4311, is that it provides that employers cannot take any adverse action against any current or prospective employee due in any part to that individual's past, present, or future military service status or obligations. Now, under that part of the statute, the service member, the military service does not have to be the major reason for the adverse action. It can just be a small part of it. But in any event, if the employer takes an adverse action against the employee doing any parts of their service, that's a violation of federal law. Okay, that's the first thing. Very similar, very similar to Title VII violations. Race, creeds, gender, that sort of thing. The next thing the law does is that it provides that individuals who leave their pre-service civilian employers to go on periods of active military service and who meet the 5 eligibility criteria for reemployment have to be promptly reinstated in the same position of status, seniority, and pay they otherwise would have had but for that period of military service. Okay? And that means any latter pay raises, that they move forward. It's like the Family Medical Leave Act in some respects, except that under FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, which puts the individual back where they were when they left, USERRA puts the individual back where they would have been had they never left. And this has been the law since 1946. It was a seminal Supreme Court case, Fishgold v. Sullivan Dry Dock. And in that case, I'll just explain very briefly. Fishgold was a ship fitter with Sullivan Dry Dock before World War II. The war broke out, and he was drafted into the Navy. Did his time in the Navy, and then he came. And in 1945, he came back, demobilized, and seeking his job back. And Fishgold and Sullivan Dry Dock said, "No, we can't. You're demobilized, and we've laid off everyone." Well, the Supreme Court determined that not only are you're entitled to return to your civilian job as if you never left because you went to serve the colors. You have additional rights that you otherwise would not have had. However, in this case, the escalator position is neutral. It can go down as well. So in this case, what happened after World War II, all these businesses lost their War Department. It wasn't DOD back then. It was the War Department. They lost their contracts with the result that they had massive layoffs, and they were able to show that his proper escalator coming back would have been a layoff. It can go both ways, but in most cases, it has a positive result. And then the third thing that the law does, it prohibits adverse retaliation, which basically means that an employer cannot take any adverse action against any employee, regardless of their military status, for either asserting or having asserted or having helped someone else assert his or her USERRA rights. And in the federal sector, it's also a prohibited personnel practice that's separate and apart from USERRA, and that's enforced by the U.S. Office of Special Counsel.
Wow. So is there a lot of do employers not like this, and does this create any kind of hesitancy for some employers to hire veterans or hire somebody that they know is in the military? Do you see discrimination in these cases?
Well, we do have. I can't speak to the reasons that an employer may not do that. Now, there is a question, for example, as to whether or not an employer can. It often comes up whether the employer can or cannot ask the individual, the prospective employee, about his or her military service, i.e., are you a veteran? Are you in the Guard or Reserve? Well, the answer is yes, they can answer that question. They can ask that question, and the prospective employee is obliged to answer honestly. But if for any reason the employer does not hire them, then they file a USERRA complaint, the employer is going to be on the hook to explain why they refused or didn't do that. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't mean they may have had valid reasons for not doing it, but if their military service was a reason, that's a violation of the statute. And 4311, what we call the section 38 U.S. Code section 4311, is the USERRA anti-discrimination section, and those cases really are difficult to are probably the most difficult of any case to investigate and substantiate. Mm-hmm. But we do quite often. And in our annual report to Congress that just came out this month, in the first of the month, we lay out all the case numbers, the numbers of discrimination cases, the number of reinstatement, and so forth. We break it down in minute detail.
Wow. So one of the things that I think is kind of amazing, one thing I heard about too, that a lot of veterans talk about, when you go into the military, it's like you're in a time capsule, because when you go into service, and you kind of talked to us a little bit, when when you leave and particularly if you're deployed, but even if you're just gone for just training, when you go, it's like you're in a bubble. So you don't know what's going on in the world, and the world's moving on without you. Like I've heard stories where guys have come back from, from previous tours, and they never seen it. They really never seen a cell phone before. And they didn't realize that there was smartphones out. Like when they've left, there were flip phones, and they came back and there were like smartphones, and they're like, what is this? Like what's going on? And then, but at the same time, the workforce is also evolving and changing as well. So when people are coming back to their old jobs, a lot of employers have been saying that, you came back, but you don't know how to, use this computer or this new software that we've been using for the last 2 or 3 years, or God forbid, you've been gone for 6 years. Now, our workforce is totally different. What do you do in cases where when employers will say you're now obsolete because you don't have the skills? You were out, doing what you were doing in the military, but now you're obsolete because your skill levels haven't evolved and our whole workforce has changed.
Oh, well, that's a big no-go. If that happens, the employer is obliged under USERRA to promptly reinstate those individuals in the same position of status, seniority, and pay they otherwise would have attained with reasonable certainty had they remained. Okay, and the employer is also obliged to get them up to speed, to give them whatever training they may need on a reasonable basis to serve in that capacity. So the one thing I would foot stomp here are the 5 eligibility criteria for reinstatement. And I'm taking a little diversion from the question, but we're going to circle back to it. Okay, so essentially, number one, the individual has to leave civilian employment to perform covered military service, and that's really any military service under orders. All right. The next thing they have to do is they have to provide notice, advance notice, to their employer that they're leaving. Now, it can be oral or in writing. We and everyone else encourage the service member to put that in writing to avoid a he said, she said scenario. And then, and they're not obliged to provide copies of orders. We encourage them to do it. DOD encourages them to do it, but they're not obliged to by law, and the employer cannot take an adverse action against them for failure to do that. Okay. Then the next criteria, they can serve up to 5 years cumulative on active duty and still retain reemployment rights. And they're subject to a number of exceptions. Stop loss, involuntary retention on active duty is not covered. Traditional Guard and Reserve duty not count toward that, or anything like that. Involuntary retention and voluntary or involuntary service performed in or in support of wartime or national emergency. So that would have been Iraq, Afghanistan, all of GWOT, Global War on Terror. Any of those, and that duty would not count against that 5-year cumulative service limit. And remember, it's a cumulative service limit. And then they have to they cannot have a disqualifying discharge, which means bad conduct, dishonorable, other than honorable. Those will cancel out any rights under USERRA if they get those. One of those. General discharge, uncharacterized, medical, those are all good to go. And then the last thing is that they have to report back to work in a timely manner. Now, under the law, it states basically that they have to submit a timely application for reemployment. And that's kind of a misnomer because they're not applying to get their old job back. They're really just telling their supervisor or the appropriate person in the chain of command that they're back and they're ready to come back, and it has to be done in a timely manner. So if they were gone for up to 30 days or less than 30 days, then they have to show up at the next work shift with enough time to rest and recover after periods of duty. So if your guard shift ended, or your duty ended at midnight on Sunday, and your shift starts at 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. on Monday morning, then you're going to have about 8 hours to rest and recuperate before coming back.
I got cheated.
And that's a good thing. And then if the duty period is between 30 and 180 days, they have 14 calendar days, 2 weeks to report back, or to let them know that they're ready to report back. And if they were gone for 180 days / 6 months or longer, then they have 90 days to report back to work or let them know. And during that, they can take all of it, part of it, or none of it if they want to. Their call to do it. So when they do come back to work, the employer is obliged to put them back in that escalator position and it is never a valid reason for the employer not to promptly reinstate them if during their absence the employer hired somebody else to do the job. They really like that person, and they say, well, yeah, we'd love to, but we fill the position, we can't bring it back. No go. That doesn't fly, and they do have to take all necessary and reasonable actions to get that person back up to speed to do that escalator position job.
That's amazing. Yeah, I got cheated a few times on that one, so maybe I don't know if there's any recourse at this point. Now
we can talk about that.
now, one of the things that I was reading about, and I hear that there's a lot of these little agreements and employment contracts for arbitration, and how arbitration can be used to circumvent USERRA. So if you sign an arbitration agreement with an employer and that you get wrongfully terminated, you come back to work and maybe they let you go 6 months later. Maybe they wait a few months before they let you go. Because of your arbitration agreement, now you can't just say, well, you can't fire me because I was doing my service. Now you have to go before an arbitrator who's going to make a decision instead of going through USERRA. How is that playing out?
Well, we're actually not seeing that as an impediment to our investigating complaints. Now, just to jump ahead just a little bit, in our annual report to Congress, we did include, and at the very end of it, in our legislative recommendations that we submitted on behalf of ourselves and the Justice Department, a provision that would clarify that USERRA trumps any private agreement, contract, or other that would circumscribe or otherwise lessen its protections. Now, there was a case, I believe it was Garrett v. Circuit City, the seminal case on arbitration agreements that occurred right around, I want to say, 03, 04, 05, in that time frame. No, I'm sorry, strike that. It was 05, 06, in that 2005, 2006, in which the plaintiff, a Marine captain, was worked for Circuit City, which is now defunct, and they had took issue with his military service, and he sued in federal court. And Circuit City argued for dismissal at the general district court level that he had signed a binding arbitration agreement that precluded him from filing suit in federal court. They had to go through an arbitration. Well, the district court held that he had USERRA rights and that he could sue on his own behalf. The Circuit City appealed that to the Fifth Circuit, I believe, and ultimately the Fifth Circuit held that right to sue is a mere procedural right, and USERRA's supremacy clause did not really apply there. And since that time, there have been a number of differing decisions split in the circuits among the federal circuits about this, and it needs cleaning up. So we recommended that, one, there's the FAIR Act, which we addressed in our annual report to Congress. But one of the things we said in an alternative, the statute should be amended just to clarify that USERRA applies to both procedural and substantive rights. So that would clear up. That would just for consistency, along with the statute. The language in the statute is fairly clear. In fact, we cited the lower Garrett decision in our justification and our regulations when we first published those back in 2005, 06 in the preamble. So it's our position that our position in the Justice Department position that USERRA does trump those kind of agreements. Now, we have not had a problem investigating cases. For example, when we see that that there is a binding arbitration agreement, we have not had a situation where the employer says, no, you can't investigate. And it's in their interest to have us do that, because in the investigation process, we're neutral. We are Switzerland, okay? Mm-hmm. We are not advocates for the employee. We're not advocates for the employer. We're advocates for the law. And USERRA is probably the most employee-friendly labor employment law in the books today. And it can be a tough law to comply with, and we really try to help employers do that. And the vast majority want to do the right thing by their employees, their service members. They really have been stepping up.
So how do people contact you if they need help and they feel like that they are wrongfully terminated, but they really don't know that they have any kind of recourse? Because oftentimes it can be intimidating and kind of daunting, particularly for a veteran who's used to following orders, used to being told what to do, and then all of a sudden they get laid off or let go, and they feel like, well, they just don't want me, and so how do people get in contact with you in order to get help?
Well, sure. Well, we have, that's easy. Let me first say that we're just a phone call or an email away. We're easy. And we have on our website at www.dol.gov/vets, I'd say again, dol.gov/vets, we have a USERRA page, and we also have the direct dial contact information for all of our staff members. And so everyone on my staff has a direct line there. I have a direct line. All the field staff out there, we have over 200 people out in the field. And each one of those has a direct dial phone number that's on that website, dol.gov/vets under contacts. And I encourage people, if they have an issue, to reach out to them. And then they can also look at our USERRA page. It's a wealth of information. When they call us, they get a live person. There should not be any voicemail or email tree to get through. They'll pick it up right away. They should be. Now, sometimes we have small state offices, like small states like Rhode Island may not have but one or two people in there, but larger states do. Now, the other thing I would add that there are a ton of resources out there for folks that need help. I would also make a plug for ESGR. That's a DoD agency, Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve, and they do super work, and they do a lot of intervening on employees' behalves. Now, one thing I really want to foot stomp, our goal, we're not out to get big settlements for people. I mean, sometimes we do, but what we're really looking to do is preserve that employer-employee relationship wherever possible, because that keeps everything spinning, the economy and everything else, and that keeps everyone employed, and if the relationships are preserved. In that regard, when things go to litigation, they've gone nuclear, and they become adversarial, and it really puts a strain on that relationship. But if you resolve these issues at the lowest level possible, then that preserves it. And so many of these disputes are really the result of a lack of understanding between the respective parties, employers, employees, about their rights and obligations under the law. And a lot of times we can clear that up with a phone call or an email. And ESGR has, and their website is www.esgr.mil. And they have a nationwide network of hundreds of volunteer ombudsmen who are educated on the law. And what they will do is they will take the information from the service member or the veteran, and then once they get there, satisfied that they have what they need from them, they don't investigate. And once they find that, then they will go out and they will talk to the employer and try to bring the two and try to find out, get to the rub of the situation and sort it out appropriately. Now, individuals can always file a complaint with us on our website. We have an electronic complaint form, the E1010, E as in Echo 1010, and they can complete that and submit it online without having to file a paper copy, hard copy. And of course, if they have other documents to submit, they can upload them. But they can also, once an investigator is assigned, they can submit to that person as well. And we have a standard when we get those complaints. We'll promptly open up an investigation in their behalf, usually within 3 to 5 business days, and then we will. And our investigations are like any other federal civil investigation or IG Inspector General investigation. We collect all evidence, all hard copy documentary evidence, and we'll interview witnesses that are identified and have information pertinent to the issues raised. And we have subpoena power. So if there's in those cases where the employer is reluctant to provide information, they get hit with subpoena, and we use it when we have to.
So do you see do you usually see employers? Are you able to resolve things most often pretty easily with employers? Are they pretty receptive once they understand the law? And you've explained it to them and everything?
I believe that's right. We have when we investigate a complaint, We don't use the word merit or non-merit. We use. I really am a big fan of the Army Inspector General and the way they operate, which is very similar to the way we do, teach and train and all that. But we seek to gather the evidence, and if the evidence we gather substantiates the allegations raised, then we will work with the employer to make sure that the employee gets what they need. We have a very good track record in resolving those substantiated complaints, and when we, I think it's in the almost 90% or higher.
Wow.
And even if we are not able to resolve a case to the claimant's satisfaction, or if the claimant is not we find the evidence does not substantiate the allegations raised, they have the absolute right to request that case be referred to the Justice Department in the case of non-federal cases, or to the U.S. Office of Special Counsel for federal sector cases for a complete brand new review. In the lawyer world, they call it de novo, but it's brand new review. They just look at the evidence, and then they decide whether or not they're going to offer representation, either in U.S. District Court or before the Merit Systems Protection Board. And so they have that. In addition, the claimant can always go to private counsel at any point in this process. They don't have to come to us, or they can come to us directly, and we'll take it from there. And a lot of times, but we have a very good track record on resolutions.
Wow, I really appreciate that for all the work and everything you guys are doing. Because I think a lot of times as well, employers, because we have a country where less and less people are serving in the military. The veteran population is actually shrinking. So we're losing veterans, at a rate of I think a few million every few years, roughly, like a million every 2 or 3 years, I believe. As our veteran population gets smaller and smaller, and fewer people are signing up to serve. That means there's fewer employers who really understand and can sympathize with the veteran experience and what that means to the country and important things that we do as veterans to support our nation. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. William Keenan Torrance, U.S. Army Operations, Desert Storm, Desert Shield. He's a veteran and presently serves as a director for the Veterans Employment and Training Service, VETS Compliance and Investigation Division. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much. Anytime.
Appreciate you.
Wow, co-host Sean, the co-host with the mostest. 4 great shows today.
It was good. Yeah, it was excellent.
Legally Speaking with Steve, our advisory board member. Mm-hmm. Next show, it was just absolutely phenomenal today.
These are the shows that you want to look up on YouTube. When you want to find some information out, search America's Heroes Group and look up this data, because this is important data people need to know.
Absolutely. You can always go to our YouTube, as Sean just said. We have our own channel, and then you can also go to podcasts. We're on every major platform, just in case you didn't get some information and you're not sure about whatever was said today. Please just research, or search, I should say, America's Heroes Group. Wow. Regarding any additional information, resources, concerns that you may have, please feel free to call America's Heroes Group at 312-803-2618. We're located at 155 North Wacker Drive, Suite 4250. To the best digital media producer in the world, Ivan Ortega, Scouts Honor Production. Yes, our technical producer, Lady J. She keeps us balanced every week. To the co-host, Sean Claiborne, has taken our show in terms of his thought process and the way he's interviewing. It's on a whole different level, and so appreciative, because we're blended. Cliff, Dr. Arnold, that's that generation. Sean has ushered in a new generation in terms of Afghanistan's and more listeners in terms of that demographic. So we're just simply balanced now in terms of voices and platforms. So it's because of you. So thank you all to our partners and guest panelists for today's show. And thank you especially to our global listening audience for watching us live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Have a blessed, wonderful weekend. On behalf of Cliff Kelly, Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold, Sean Claiborne, America's Heroes Group.
We have in our Chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, and service and food. Look good.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. On behalf of Cliff Kelly, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help